Rec- Wonderful. All right. Colin, thank you so much for coming on the Studio Class podcast and doing this masterclass episode with us. I am so thrilled to invite you on and to share your knowledge and all of your amazing experiences. Maybe not all of them. We don't have that much time, but like to share your experiences with the listeners. So I was wondering if you would kick us off by telling us a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. We've known each other in life and online for 12 years now, I think.
My gosh, wow.
I've loved watching your journey too. It's so impressive how you've managed to just take such a hold in this contemporary music scene. And I'm so thrilled to see that.
Thank you.
Appreciate you remembering me and having me on. So let's see. I live in Los Angeles now. When we met, I was in the whole like, I'm trying to be a classical and opera singer, young artist programs thing. And I did that for a while. And, I had a couple successes. I was able to tour in Europe, which was really amazing. And then I came back to the States and the economy tanked and my voice changed. And that was all just a wake up call, sort of like, hey, knock, knock, like, or you don't have a place here in opera right now. You haven't figured out where your voice is. It didn't really jive. I was pushing at it for a couple more years. And I started the Opera Insider, which you might remember, which was an online community for those in front of and behind the curtain. So life from both sides of the curtain. And my mom and I we did that for a while. And then I started working at a tech company because I needed a job.
Yeah.
And I met a guy and he gave me a job. And that was a VC-backed firm that was in Series B at the time. And I went with them through Series D, which was 4.5 years, during which I founded Five Senses Tastings, which is the company I now own. And I was doing that in the morning, in the elevator bank at lunch, at night, side. And then in 2016, I quit my job and moved to LA in the same week and have been doing that full time ever since.
Wow. Oh, hold on. I have a little bit of a lag here. And I'm hoping that Hannah will cut this out in just a second. There we go. Sorry about that. Hannah's going to cut out my little pause there.
Oh.
And
I don't think it's me. I'm showing full connection.
Yeah. I don't think so. For some reason, it's just like taking some time. It's kind of like, so with that, so Colin, that I love that you were talking about joining the tech company. When you were making that, I have just had this quick question about like, when you were making that choice, you said that you met somebody, and was that through talking to them that you felt like you were well aligned for that position? Did it feel like you knew that you were looking for a position like the one that you found in the tech company? I'm just so curious because I know that a lot of us are balancing different facets of professional lives. And so that's one of those ways in which we're like, well, I'm this opera singer. I've also built this entire platform with my mom. And now I'm also like doing this thing. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I went to, I think it was the New York Times Small Business Luncheon or something like that. And I knew nobody. And I sat down next to this guy named Jack. And Jack was like, I run this tech company doing translation and localization. I was like, what is localization? I've never heard that word, but I'm a certified translator. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
And he knew what it was. And I was like, I want to work for you. And he's like, I don't have a job for you. And I was like, well, you're gonna.
Yeah.
I was like, that's okay. I'm not looking right now, which I don't remember if I was. And then like maybe 8 months later, I was like, I've been following you guys and you're going to hire me.
Yeah.
Like, be here. Yeah. And he did. He hired me as an office manager. He's like, I know this is not what you want.
Yeah.
But come and do this for 6 months and then I'll let you run your own team. Wow. If you can do these things. And I did that.
I was wondering, I love what you were saying about approaching somebody. I think this is so often how it's done, where it's like we meet people, we realize, oh, well, that's a place that I want to be. I want to be working on that thing. And then, and then just letting people know that that's what you're interested in puts you kind of in their frame of reference too, where they can say, okay, well, this is that do you want to take this job for 6 months? Like, do you want to do this? And then and then make those choices. It doesn't always look like the perfect thing on paper, but you're like, well, I want to be there, and I think this is the right path. And I'm wondering, I'm sure that those experiences probably formed a lot of things. I knew that you had, from Opera Insider, you had a lot of running your own business, that probably adding experiences from the tech company helped with Five Senses tasting. I'm imagining, like, all of that together.
I think, people always ask you, like, what have you taken from this experience? I mean, you'd have to write it down as you were having it, right? Like, it's just accumulated life and professional experience. It's really hard to say that.
Yeah.
What I gained. I mean, I certainly learned how to form partnerships in the Opera Insider, which is something that I took to Five Senses.
Yeah.
But I grew up away from home. So, like, I've always been one to just sort of be like, you're a circle and I'm alone, so can I be a part of it? And just kind of like inserting myself into stuff is not really a problem for me. It's much more now, like, I got used to not having to do that, and I'm not really into networking anymore, but I still be like, hi, can I just join your circle?
Yeah.
That for you all.
And
Great.
I think that people get so nervous about it when, if you just kind of steel yourself and go, can I be in your circle? Can I join you? Like, hey, I'd like to do this now. Then people are like, oh sure. Okay, come on in.
They can't be like, no, you can't be here, because then they're mean, and you can't be mean. So, yeah, that's great. And then if you realize you don't have any mojo with these guys, you leave.
Yeah, exactly. So, Hala, I ask everybody that comes on the podcast, at the beginning of our episodes, to tell me about an intention that you're keeping for yourself. And I know, that you're kind of at a chapter change and things like that in life, but also just generally, what's an intention that you're keeping for yourself at the moment?
Well, I would say the honest answer is that the words intention, goal, and vision are challenging for me.
Yeah.
They don't resonate in a massive way.
Yeah.
I don't set intentions at the beginning of my Pilates practice like the teacher tells me. I don't have a list of goals. That's not how I work. I think for now, at the place in my life, my intention is to keep calm while I navigate this storm that's coming. For those listening, I own a business, and I'm going to be, I'll say sunsetting, just because I'm not going to be shutting it down, but I'm going to be sunsetting it and doing a major, like a full career change. And I don't know what that is right now. So for me, that's my intention, is to remain as calm and collected and non-manic as I can through that. And that's through things that I do, like exercise and being outside and all that stuff. But that's the big one, I think.
Yeah, I think that's so great. I love that you mentioned a couple of the ways that you do that for yourself, because I was thinking about that. And in our music lives, I think we also have a lot of uncertainty. I would say that I don't think anybody's come out of the last few years, not feeling uncertain about things. And I would just love to hear if you have just a couple of those things that you've really hit on for yourself, of how you do that, how you stay calm, especially when you know that there's information coming in that might make you feel uncertain, like uncomfortable. You're looking forward and you're like, yep, I'm going to be making these changes, or I'm going to try something, but I'm kind of scared about it right now.
I think I would say that we are all way more resilient than we think we are, especially after the last few years. And I have gotten to so many parts of my business, so many moments in my business in the last couple of years where I've gone, I literally have no idea how to do this, but no idea.
Yeah.
I guess I'll start here, maybe, or there, or ask that person. So I would say, embrace the journey over the destination.
Mm-hmm.
If you possibly can. The destination that you have in mind will maybe 50% of the time be where you end up.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe a log track and you get this log job and whatever, but if you're an artist, your path is not going to be linear. Like, almost surely it's not going to be linear. And so I think just going like, yeah, shoot, like, I don't know right now, but I'm going to figure it out. And I can't say that's going to work all the time, but I was just having a conversation with a colleague of mine in a similar business, and she goes, I didn't realize how resilient I am. And I feel the same way.
Yeah.
It's in us, and we just have to find it.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's so true. I'm wondering with what you were saying, if there's anything in your business or in your life that you love to teach, right? So this can be lots of different things, but you've had all of these awesome experiences in which you've like learned a ton. And I think that makes you such a fascinating, person that I think so many of us are kind of like when we do a lot of left brain, right brain stuff together.
Yeah.
That you've taken in all of these things, but is there anything that you love to kind of just go over with people and help them learn from the beginning?
I have I guess a couple different answers. One is yes. I mean, my business is about music and wine pairings, and so I love to bust myths about wine and about music. So
yeah.
For you out there, if you think you don't like Riesling, Riesling is also dry, and dry Riesling is awesome.
Yeah.
So I busting for people. I love going, you think you don't like classical music, but this car commercial, right? And you like it. Like, that's classical music. Or you think opera's boring. How about this?
Yeah.
And they go, oh my God, like, you don't sing with a mic and you sing and all that's so cool. The power of the human voice. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times, people don't know what they're about to see. And then I open my mouth and they're like, right. Yeah. So kind of like opening people up to the things they didn't know they could love. I love doing that. And that's what's guided my business. Yeah. I would say there's a lot of talk in like female entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in general and life in general now about values. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another word like vision and intention and meditation and mindfulness that's gotten muddy. Mm-hmm. I appreciate the idea of values. We guide our business with the ideas of, diversity and freedom and abundance and all that. What is that? That is completely intangible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
It's fine to have those. You need to have your hard values that you're not giving up on. For me in my business, it's one value, which art is worth paying for. And I pay my artists and you pay me.
Yes.
Hard value that I will not ever waver on.
Yes.
Everything else is up for discussion pretty much, other than like being gross and mean. Yeah. And not, right? But I think that we've spent a lot of time being in this like ethereal, like woo-woo land, which is great. I have no problem with that. But in business, you have to have hard things that you're not negotiable on. Yeah. And for me, part of that is money. And that's why I'm leaving the business, partly because I'm not negotiating on the value that I place on my business. And currently that value is not translating.
Yeah.
What's the point? Like, where do I go from there, right? And so I think that you come to a point sometimes in your life when you've assessed your value or the value of the product or service you give, and the market or the world doesn't see that, you can keep banging your head against that world and it's not going to change. Yeah. So sometimes you have to listen. You have to go, okay, my values aren't going to change, but my approach is going to change.
Ooh, I love this conversation so much. Also, I think this is a conversation that is hard for artists to have with themselves about being devoted to their art, but also being in the marketplace in certain ways, right? And I think anybody that comes to me knows that I'm like, well, yeah, make your art, that's fine. But if you also want to do this in the marketplace, then this is the kind of conversation you need to have with yourself. And I very much value your thoughts on this and your insight on this, because you have been and have run multiple businesses at this point, in which you do have to be honest about what is the bottom line. Is this making us sustainable in this way? And I don't know if we always look at that as individual artists in the same way and say, is my business being sustainable? Is my business? And I think I love hearing you say that, also from that context of getting very clear on what is your one value that you're not willing to compromise on. I'm wondering if you could talk about how you came to the isolation of that, because obviously you felt that way from the beginning. I mean, you've felt that way coming through school and all of your professional experience, but there is probably a moment where you crystallized that into, this is something that I tell other people when we meet.
Yeah, I mean, it's because I'm a performer.
Yeah.
And because I just the other day had to write to someone, a guy who hires me for church gigs, that I don't have a church gig anymore. I paid my dues, but I sub in when I want to.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I've been singing with you for 6 years and the pay hasn't changed. So, and after I'll do the next one that I promised. And after that, you need to pay me X number of dollars per appearance. Thanks, Kala.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we need to do. And I think that it was really interesting because I was actually recently hired by an event production company to go sing at a winery.
Yeah.
And in a way that was similar to what I do with people. And it was really interesting to see that from that side. Like, I sing on some of my events, but I haven't been hired for things like that. And to see it from that perspective and see, like, I was paid quite nicely for that. And how much do I pay my artists? I certainly can't pay them that. It was like a fancy pants thing.
Yeah.
But, when people, don't want to pay for live musicians or something. Oh, no, I don't want to. Well, you know what? Music and art and whatever have been in our lives forever, and we cannot exist without culture and beauty in the world. I say beauty is not a luxury. Art is not a luxury. Culture is not a luxury. It's a requirement for our well-being.
Yes.
Just like our physical checkups. I call it sensory wellness. We talk about physical wellness. We go to the doctor. We go to the gym. We go on hikes. We talk about our mental health. We go see therapists, or we go on hikes, or we go somewhere. We never talk about, our sensory health and things like that. Yeah. I think I got off topic a bit, but
no, I love that.
But how I isolated it was being the person who had to fight for being paid a fair wage and being accepted as the expert. And like, if you're telling me to go sing opera a cappella, you don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't work. Yeah. Don't tell me you want that. I won't do it.
Yeah.
I will make you look bad. I know that you don't know what opera is, but I do. Yeah. And so please listen to me, because I know what it is and I know what its value is.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a good point about being a subject matter expert, right? Is inhabiting that role with people that are hiring you or trying to contract you for something. You are the person who is the subject matter expert on what you do. And so when people are coming to you for something, then I love your ability to cut through any of that other noise that you might have interpreted at some point and just be like, this is the deal. This is what's up. This is what's going to make you look good. This is what you actually really want here. And being able to communicate that with them in a way that they understand. So they're like, actually, you're right. Yeah, I do want that. I do want to pay you for that experience. That's what I'm trying to get here. So I really love that.
And it's very difficult to do that sometimes, even as a business owner, because, I have a lot of clients who come to me and they're like, oh, well, I'd like a wine tasting, but I don't want any music. I'm like, well, then why are you at my company? Because that's what I do. But sure, I mean, no skin off my back. Like, I can do that for you. It's money in the bank. And so I would not say, like, you can have live musicians and not pay them, but I'll compromise on that part of my business, because you know what? I got to run the thing.
Yep. Well, and I don't, you're right, because that's a portion of your offering rather than the full offering. Not paying musicians is not an offering that you're making. You're like, oh no, that's not on the menu whatsoever. Like, that doesn't count. Well, also, I ask this question to everybody about what's a micro action that you feel like has served you really well in your business. And I think we've talked about this like very long ago in the past, but a micro action is really like, what is the smallest unit of a thing? Not the whole. I always give the same example. Write the grant is not a micro action because there's so many parts to it, right? There's lots of things, but breaking it down into its smallest unit is the micro action, right? If I do finish the budget or something like that, that's a micro action. So I bring this up also because I don't want this to necessarily be your micro action, but I have to say that I've always loved your emails from Five Senses Tasting. And I feel like that's a perfect example sometimes of what it is to just like have a micro action, which is communicate with your audience, communicate with your community, with your clients, with your, business stakeholders, et cetera, in a way that exemplifies your brand. And I think you do that so well. So I feel like that's one of the reasons why I want to ask you this question, but I'm sure that you have your own version of a micro action that you think has been important to your career?
It's really funny that you isolate the emails because I do not like writing them.
But you do it so well.
Thank you. Well, now I actually have a person who works for me who helps me with them.
Yes.
So, like, you're too wordy. Stop talking. You're too many words. Oh my goodness. I remember this question. I remember filling it out on your intake form, being like, I don't know. I don't know that I have one answer for that. I would say it definitely changes depending on what thing I'm doing. Totally. And for me, like, it's actually a body thing, which is moving it. It's super simple. Like, I don't do good work unless I move my body in the morning. Like, I've been sick the last week and I haven't been able to do much. And I feel it. Like, I'm not as productive. And so you can, I'm not really a project breakdown person. I've tried Trello, I've tried Asana, I've tried all the project management tools. I spend more time on there than doing the projects.
Right.
So I'm not that kind of person, but I'm a list maker. And I do think that there's, you can kind of see the whole like geography or ecosystem of your day or sometimes of your month if you do that. So I think I don't have one, honestly, but I would say like a habit, maybe a micro habit, is exercise and list making.
I think those are both really great. I like both of those as micro actions. As someone who very much vibes with list making, I just think that list making can be a very cathartic experience because you get it all out and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I see. And what you said about seeing the geography of your day, your month, maybe a quarter or something like that is so true. It's so, if you kind of keep your list somewhere and kind of review things that you've done over time, you start to really see, oh, that's where I spend my time. That's what I've been doing. That's really what's taken up my brain space. I think that's so interesting.
Well, I use a time tracker too, actually.
Which one?
I use Toggle.
That's what I use too. I think it's so helpful, don't you?
I do, actually. And it's more about like just reminding me that I'm working. Like, it just reminds me, and because it'll pop up when I'm like scrolling on Facebook or doing when I'm like, oh, wasted time, personal, I like login or like breakfast, so it helps.
Well, and I'm not entirely sure your infrastructure of your business, where do you work, together with anybody on your team, or do you normally work kind of individually in your home or your office, where something like that can be really helpful, especially when we're in our spaces, all day, every day, wearing lots of different hats. When you time track, I think maybe you could talk a little bit more about how that's been useful to you, or when you started doing that.
Probably a coach told me to do it and I did it and it was a good idea. I hired somebody in February who's been completely indispensable to me since the moment she started. Her title, I think, is Director of Management and Engagement and Growth or something like that. It just means she's awesome and is my second brain. And so she only works 3 days a week. So they're and she's on the East Coast. So I would say, 80% and 90% of my time is my time, and it's alone. And I live by my calendar. I put everything on one calendar. I know people have like personal and business. I have to put them all on one because it needs to block off. Mm-hmm. And then, I track everything I do, personal as well as business. And then at the end of the week, like, your personal is always going to be more because it's like, it's more time than you work usually, or maybe it is for me.
I would hope so.
Yeah, but I really like it. I think it's super helpful.
I'm wondering if you would also share with us a little bit about kind of the life cycle of running a business. And I also consider your time singing professionally or when that was a larger part of what you were doing as its own business. So like multiple kind of stages of this. Would you tell us a little bit about what you feel is the life cycle, like getting excited about something where you're starting, what it's like running and managing the business, and then also when you are making that choice? I think that one that I'm particularly interested in is when you start to see that there might be something next, kind of quote unquote, there's a next thing on the horizon, and just sharing what that feels like for you.
I think it took me a long time to internalize the fact that change did not equal failure.
Mm.
And that's a recurring theme, especially among entrepreneurs and I'm sure artists. But I remember, and I still feel this way sometimes, I didn't work hard enough in my opera career. I could have made it. I think I could have made it.
Yeah.
But I didn't work hard enough. And then I think, is that actually the life I want now? No, it's not.
Yeah.
So the life cycle for me is, I have kind of a 2 to 4 year cycle. So the fact that I've had this business for 10 is completely bonkers. And yeah, so the first couple of years, you think you're invincible and you think you have the best idea known to mankind. And you spend every waking hour that you don't have to be somewhere else working on your business and networking and telling everyone how great it is and making business cards before you have a business plan. And then,
so real.
And then PS, the first person you should ever hire is a bookkeeper. I did not do that. Hire a bookkeeper.
Yes.
PS. And then, it depends how long your life cycle is, but I think you get into like this sort of just like you're coasting. You're like, okay, this is how it is. Like, regardless of financial stuff, like I've got my ideas set. I've had some clients, like I understand the process of getting new clients and doing whatever it is I do, and then offboarding those clients and what is my work-life balance and all that. And then, there's the life cycle now, which is like, oh, holy COVID, or holy economic crash, or holy this, right? You can't prepare, but maybe you can. And then I think knowing when it's time to stop, I think it's a feeling and it's a knowing, and it's a resignation, but not in a bad way. It's just an understanding that what you have and what is needed are not the same thing anymore. And that doesn't mean that what you have is bad or in any way of lesser value than it was when it was needed.
Yeah.
Wanted. But it is not needed or wanted right now, at least by not by the people you're able to reach. And I think it's two different things, right? Like the value of my business still exists in my heart and in my mind. And the value that other people, by definition, my company depends on other people assigning it that same value, is not the same.
Yeah.
And I can't make that happen. I mean, maybe I could.
Yeah.
I'm out of ideas of how to do that, and I'm out of energy. I'm exhausted of making every single decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I started just like, my brain is just, it's done. It's done. I don't care that much anymore. And that's when you go, oh. When you start to go, I don't know if I care anymore.
Yes. Yes. I think I see so much of our lives as performers and or composers in that life cycle too, where and have worked with lots where they feel like they're at that point where there isn't something on the other side feeling like, oh, I have to do that, or I'm so excited about doing this thing, or exactly what you said, for some reason I can't make other people ascribe the same value to it that I'm sharing. And that doesn't mean that it's a failure in any way, or that you don't understand the business or you don't understand what you're doing, but it does mean that it's just that's not aligning at the moment. And I think that's such a hard recognition to have. And I think so many of the singers that I've known that have left the business, I'm not even sure if I want to call it like that as the phrase, but they stopped pursuing singing as a professional path. And I think a lot of them really resonate with that feeling of there isn't a thing here for me anymore, or at least not with the people that I have access to. And I think the way that you phrased that is really helpful to hear when we're kind of talking about this, and the kinds of conversations that I also really like to have on this podcast, to talk about what does that feel like. You're not alone if you've ever gone through that. You're not the only person who's ever experienced that feeling and wanting to pivot or whatever, set it down for a minute, come back, that kind of stuff. I'm wondering, do you have more thoughts about that feeling of setting it down, or maybe the similarities or differences with how it felt with singing versus, I mean, I want to be very clear that you still sing through things. Like you don't, so you are still a musician, you still sing all the time. And like the way that you're pursuing it professionally is different than another part of your life that, yeah.
I mean, I think I realized that I got to a part in my career in music where I realized that I wasn't breaking through a certain level,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't willing to put in the work to get to that next level. Like what it required of me was not something I wanted to do in my late 20s,
Mm-hmm.
early 30s. And it was like mostly a conscious decision and somewhat of a maybe I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I'm just bowing out. I don't know. I've wondered about that. I don't have an answer to that. But this to me, I feel like I tried to do this in the summer, or I started to think about this in the summer, and I was looking at jobs, redoing my resume, all this stuff, and it felt gross. It felt awful. It felt terrible. And I didn't know why, because I felt like it was like absolutely necessary. But then I guess business ticked up just enough to kind of trick me into thinking that maybe I still had something to do. And I did the switch to sensory wellness and all this stuff. And then I was in New York for a week, and I walked 60 miles in 70 days.
Whoa,
and
yeah.
It just got walked out of me, which was like, you're done.
Yeah.
You're done. And it was calmer. It was calmer and like just inevitable, but not in like a sad way exactly. I mean, I know I'll cry about it, and
yeah.
It doesn't feel, I had a great year, my best year ever last year. And I did that, I cleared a really good amount of revenue. I mean, the IRS took it all, but I did. And I did that, and I showed myself I could do it. And honestly, if you want, you didn't ask about this, but a lot of people will say, like, what's your definition of success? I was on this thing today where it's like, define what worth, how you measure your worth. Frankly, I'm sick of it. Like, these things, like, they're intangible things. You cannot define them I cannot define them for myself. But I don't know where I was going with this. I was on my soapbox about undefinable definables.
No, I love this though. I think it's so important.
But I think we shy away from saying that we're allowed to want financial success, and like success can be financial. We're told that's not good. We should have these ethereal values, that's what our success should be. BS. I call BS on that. I had a great year last year. I raked it in. I loved it.
Yep. Amen.
Also,
amen.
And did things, but honestly, I loved that part of it.
Yes. Well, and I think that, I mean, there's also a certain like, pleasure that I take in your business, which is also that you're raking it in, and it has to do, like, it's in the arts. Like, there's so much of what we do. I wonder if this was a discussion that you ever had at the beginning of Five Senses Tasting, if to be for profit or nonprofit, right? Because I think that so much of the arts is like, well, I'm gonna start a 501c3, and then and people don't make money in the arts, and so there's a part of my heart that like just really glows when you're like, and I made bank last year.
That was a huge discussion. People ask me all the time, and I was like, no, I am proudly for profit, and I am never going to beg for money. I'm not good at it. And that's part of what I grew up in Europe where our arts are subsidized. And, I really disliked that part. I felt very uncomfortable about that part of like, please come sing at some donor dinners because we really need money. I mean, I understand that like the government doesn't give you bleep, so you have to, right? But I can do it differently as a private business owner. I don't have to do it that way. And there was no nonprofit part of what I was doing. Right. It was culture and beauty, and what I do is worth paying actual money for. And
exactly. Well, and I think what I really love about when we talk about it from that angle is also being very clear about, well, these are my products and services, and they're for profit. Like, this is what I'm doing. You have to be very clear about that. And I think sometimes when we remove that question of like, how am I going to get paid for this, then people don't get very clear about what they do either, or why people would invest in that, why people would value that with cash or other types of value. And so I think that's an important lesson that I take away from that, is also when you're pursuing it that way, you have to be very clear. You have to be very clear about what the value is to your clients and what they're going to get out of it. And that means that you spend that time really digging in and being like, why do people care enough to put money behind this?
Well, and there is always a bridge to overcome when you're talking about something art related, because it is an intangible benefit to life, right? You can't tell somebody that you're going to go to this concert and you're going to feel 27% better.
Yeah.
And you should go. And it's worth $92, but not $95. You cannot quantify the value of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what art always gets into. That's art's inherent obstacle, is that you cannot quantify it.
Yeah, absolutely. I realized that I didn't ask you this very early in our conversation, but if you would talk a little bit about the format of how Five Senses Tasting works. And, we don't have to belabor that, but I do think it's so interesting for people that haven't gotten to interact with it about what it is and what you do.
Sure. So it started out as it came from the idea that I was born in Europe, and I grew up in the sensory ecosystem, right, of gray skies and whatever Northern Europe is like, and that other people didn't. They had different ecosystems that they grew up in. And so I was kind of fascinated by this idea of like breaking out of this ecosystem. And how would you do that? You would taste, I'm making air quotes, you would taste lots of different things. And I love the idea of a flight of wine. I thought it was really whimsical and interesting. And I wondered if you could do that with music. This was when like Opera on Tap came, and whichever was the one in Brooklyn within Lofts, that one, Loft, I don't know what they're called. Awesome. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to make opera accessible by putting it in bars. That's not what I want to do. What I want to do is share stories with people through the beauty of 500 years of music, while so kind of softening the blow with wine and cheese and chocolate.
Yeah.
And so I call them musical wine tastings. And they are storytelling experiences where music, wine, food, and sweet treats are in service of the story. This could be a personal story, like a 50th birthday or an anniversary. It could be a product launch. It could be, an Adobe executive summit. It could be Louis Vuitton. It could be Google, right?
Yep.
I've worked with all these clients in different ways, but all of them were about bringing their story to their customers or their employees in some way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do.
I love that. I think I think so much about, as we're figuring out who we want to be as artists too, I think taking in stories like that, or how you created your business, what you're trying to deliver to your clients, helps us also think broadly about what we can do as artists and who we can be in the world. And that's just another reason that I wanted to invite you on the podcast, is to talk about, well, yeah, I'm a musician in a lot of ways. And one of the ways that I like to be a musician is in this way, where I'm sensory wellness and matching, like bringing people's stories to life, and in this really, this really multifaceted way, I think is so helpful. So I'm hoping that listeners will also kind of take that, and if they've been sitting with an idea where they're like, maybe I could do this with my music or do this with my art, and just run with it, give it a try. I think that's another aspect. I wonder if you are the kind of entrepreneur where you would say something like that to someone. Do you just say, go, give it a whirl, or are you kind of like, business plan it out first?
I never wrote a business plan for my business. Actually, that's not true. I wrote one probably maybe 2 years after, and I've never looked at it again.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's no right time to have a baby. There's no right time to start a business. I believe that. I do think that you should plan for it. So I planned for a year before I started my business, partly because I just couldn't get out and it wasn't quite right, but I planned and saved, and I didn't know exactly when it would be. But yeah, I would recommend you save up some money, because you might be broke for a really long time if you don't do that. And that's not fun.
No.
So I think just throwing caution to the wind is not clever, especially not, unless you come from money or you've saved up already, or you don't care, which is fine. All of those are fine. And I think that there's a lot of like silent judgment of people who do have money or have made money or come from money. And I really think that's bad. Like you can't change who you are. So if you have that luxury and you want to make something, do it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Exactly.
You don't need to Yeah, I mean, in general, I would say go for it.
Yeah.
But in the arts, you really are going to have to justify a whole lot.
Would you also talk a little bit about, I think that I might be a lot like more adamant or excitable about things like goals and vision and like the kind of like XYZ planning, like break it down into this thing. And I think that when you're saying to me that you're like, I kind of feel like I'm on the other side of that a little bit, I think that's a really good spectrum. And I was wondering if you would talk about that feeling. I don't want to put words in your mouth about how you feel about it, but just like that is a perspective that's not the way that I'm coming to it, you know, where you're also an incredibly successful person. What does that feel like when you don't necessarily put like really intense goals on something in the way that other people might say that phrase?
It's an excellent question. And the reality is I don't know how to answer it. All I know is that when I look into the future, I don't see a particular thing that has happened or that exists for me.
Yeah.
In that sense, my goals are those ethereal things. I'd like to live in abundance. I'd like to live in a, you know, culturally diverse place that offers me wonderful opportunities, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I can make that happen in a way, but I don't have like, I want to have achieved X thing. I did when I was younger, right? Like, I want to achieve this job, get this job, or have this scholarship, or record this thing by this date.
Yeah.
I mean, I have had that in my business. Usually, like, there will be like, you know, it's seasonal something and I have to get something done by a certain time. But I think that it's really foisted on us from every angle. We are supposed to have this goal, these goals and this direction and this vision, quote unquote. Some of us do not operate. All I can tell you is some of us do not operate on that level. And to force that language is more stressful.
Definitely. Definitely.
And so I have never been in any kind of like entrepreneurship conference or anything where people do not just hoist this idea that you have a why and that you must have a vision and you've got to have goals or you'll never get there.
Sorry, I'm laughing so hard because I just had a rant the other day where I was like, if one more person asks me about my why before they help me get to like the nuts and bolts about how to do this thing, I'm going to be so upset. Like, I was like, I don't need that information right now.
and yeah, it does. I think it bothers me partly because I can't explain it, but I can tell you that it hasn't changed for me in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I'm over 40 and I'm not assuming it's gonna, right? Like,
yes.
It's not gonna change. I do not resonate with those words. They do not help me.
Yeah.
I understand they help other people. I'm happy for you. That's great. And I'm not saying I don't understand the thinking behind it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying those words stress me out and paralyze me.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's what have you found any other types of things, especially as you're looking at the quote unquote, like what comes next time in your life, that if this side, you know, one side of the spectrum is this is stressing me out, you know, what feels like the opposite side where you're like, well, here's a way that I kind of think about what's next. Maybe it's walking. Like you said sometimes you just go out, like if you just walk it, then it's kind of like the tumblers in a vault. They just kind of start to fall into place after a little while. I'm wondering, you know, if that feels like it. I don't know.
You have great questions. I love the way you formulate your questions. And I would say existing, like just going through your days in that time. Like right now, I know I'm in a period where like goals and vision and whatever should be a thing. They aren't a thing for me. So what is for me a thing is exploration, curiosity, follow your curiosity. A friend of mine said, follow the open doors, make the open doors, because from those open doors, maybe will come a bit more clarity for that vision or whatever it is, the word that resonates with you. But for me, it's, you know, I know you love curiosity, but it's about following any open door, right? I never knew that localization was a word, let alone an industry, and I spent 4.5 years in it.
Yeah, right. That's so interesting. I love that. That's definitely something that I feel like I can hang on to, of being on the the side that really likes to kind of put big goals out there and then like kind of break them down and that kind of stuff. My brain gets really fired up by that. And then, but I definitely work with lots of people that feel the same way that you do. So I always try to figure out ways to make that feel less icky and not like, well, it doesn't work this way for everybody. So what are the ways that we're going to start to like coalesce, you know, these ideas just by exploring and existing, you know?
It's weird that I'm going to make a marriage comparison here, but people, you know, I'm not married, but I am in a partnership, and people have asked me, you know, would you ever get married? And I was like, yeah, if it feels like liberation. And I think that you have to find the word or the concept or word or the direction that feels like liberation for you when you're looking for this goal, this vision, this, what is it? Intention, right?
Yeah.
You have to look for that. Those words, to me, that pressure of having to find that feels very limiting. To me, that feels like this. To me, I want to say, if someone said, what's your open door, or what door do you want to walk through?
Yep.
Where can you find your open field? Like if somebody asked me more open, visually open kind of things, I might be able to go there. I've never thought of that. Literally came now.
Yeah.
But the power of the word is so strong. And I think we are so tied to this language that we have not understood that it can be really limiting. I mean, we don't talk to people about certain things if they're dealing with depression or they're suicidal or whatever. I'm not saying this is traumatic, but these words do not work for me. So find other words.
Yep. Absolutely.
Doesn't mean I don't have a vision that I am less of a business owner or that I have less future direction.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and that's why I, you know, wanted to just kind of like keep going with that for a minute, because it's always so interesting to me, like, what are the ways that it just feels kind of, I love what you said about feeling liberated. Like, what are some of the things that open that up so that it doesn't feel like I'm being forced to operate like other people operate in their business that's not like my business or my, you know, my path, you know, and what does feel like my path? What does feel like something that resonates for me is always the better question. Like, what, instead of saying like, we all work this way. All humans do this thing. No, they don't. Nope, that's not true. So yeah. You did mention, Kala, that, you know, curiosity is one of my big things. I love it so much, and why I want to sit here and ask questions all the time to people and learn how their brains work and what they do in their lives and all that kind of good stuff. So I am super curious about what you're curious about right now.
Well, I'll answer it two ways. So I'm very curious about what my next step is going to be. I'm very curious about what doors will open.
Yeah.
What doors do I not, like, what don't I even know is out there for me?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm also really curious about why mean people exist and what makes mean people do mean things.
Yeah.
And the other part of my life, as you probably know, is political activism, specifically voting activism.
Yes.
And I've done it for over 20 years, and that's part of where I want to go in my life, maybe.
Yeah.
And I cannot embody any understanding of why you would want to be mean to people trying to vote, why you would want to be mean to people who are in that, you know, the voter intimidation thing that just came out. But in any way, I don't understand why you want to be mean. And I'm not really curious, I guess. How do you stop people being mean?
Yeah, there you go. That's a great question.
So I know it's kind of global, but I'm really flummoxed by why you would want to exist in your own body being so mean.
Mm-hmm. That is a great question that I'm hoping that we all ponder for ourselves, which is, you know, when we feel ourselves experiencing it, and also when we feel ourselves kind of being that, like, where does that come from, and what ways can we kind of check that in ourselves? What do I actually need here that's resulting in this kind of behavior, rather than what I probably need is to, like, ask for my needs to be met in different ways, stuff like that. Right. So I think those are so great. Kala, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Before I let you go, I do want to ask, you know, where would you like people to kind of, I don't know, keep in touch with you or kind of stay apprised of what comes next in your life on the interwebs, wherever you want people to kind of check out your goings on?
Sure. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I'm sure my name will be spelled in the show notes because it's a little weird for me there. My website is fivesensestastings.com, all written out. And that's also my handle on Instagram, and I'll be keeping that alive. So check us out here.
Perfect, perfect. And in case somebody is driving and they don't want to look at the show notes right now, will you spell your name out for people who are listening?
It is KALAMAXYM.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Well, Colin, thank you so much. I hope that we get to do a an in the future episode where I bring you back and we're talking about all of the cool things that you're doing in your next chapter. We'll have to do like a follow-up to this one. But thank you so much for being a Masterclass episode guest. This means the world to me. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It means the world to me that you have kept up with us all these years. Yeah, I really appreciate being here. What you do is really important, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.